The Seattle Seahawks 2024 season is in the books, so in this video, let's go ahead and do my Seattle Seahawks mock off-season. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Let's hop into it. So the way the video is going to work is we're going to be doing everything that the Seattle Seahawks are going to be doing this off-season. We're going to begin by managing their finances in the team assets portion of the video. Then we'll talk about some of the team's free agents, who we're going to re-sign and who we're going to let walk. Then we'll talk about some of the positional needs this team needs to fix, whether it's in free agency or in the draft. We'll then go over my free agency plan for the Seahawks, and then lastly, we'll be doing 2 3-round mock drafts. But we are going to begin with the team assets portion of the video. Now, currently, as of when I'm recording this video, they are negative $13 million in total cap space, meaning that we actually have to open up cap space just to get even in our salary cap. The good news is they do have 8 draft picks and a number of contracts that are either cuttable, or we do have a couple players we could also extend to open up a decent amount of cap space. So we're going to begin by giving a couple extensions out. Now, this team does have a lot of extension candidates, guys like Tariq Woolen, a number of other players. I decided not to give extensions to because I just don't feel terribly confident in them, but there were 3 players that I do feel confident in moving forward that I decided to go ahead and hand out extensions to. Those 3 players are going to be Charles Cross, Boy Mafe, and Kobe Bryant. Now, Charles Cross, if you do extend him, he's going to open up around $2 million in open cap space in 2025. Charles Cross has been a dependable tackle for the Seattle Seahawks last year, 82.5 overall PFF grade. I feel pretty confident moving forward that he is going to be a big part of this offensive line, so getting an extension done early would make a lot of sense. Then there's Boy Mafe, who opens up only around $500,000 of open cap space in 2025, but I felt that it was worth getting the contract done and over with now because Boy Mafe has been a big part of this defense, has been one of the better pass rushers in this unit, so bringing him back was a big priority for me. And then I also wanted to extend Kobe Bryant, which opens up around $1.5 million. I actually rounded up a tad bit because if you take the 1.5 from Kobe Bryant and the $500,000 from Boy Mafe, it makes around $2 million of open cap space. Kobe Bryant came in last year, was a dependable safety for this team, and I do think moving forward he's going to be a big part of the secondary, so I wanted to go ahead and just get that contract taken care of. In terms of restructuring deals, there were a few players I did consider, but ultimately I decided not to restructure any of the contracts. I actually believe they've already restructured Leonard Williams' contract, so that would have been the one contract I would have done, but I think they already did so. Now, when it comes to cutting players, we're actually going to be cutting a lot of players because this team has a lot of contracts that, quite frankly, they probably shouldn't be paying these players as much money as they actually are. We're going to begin by cutting George Fant pre-June 1st, which will open up $4 million. Now, George Fant was supposed to be a reliable swing tackle for this team, but injuries kind of came in the way this year. Ultimately speaking, I will be looking to replace him with a cheaper option in free agency. By cutting him, he gives us an additional $4 million. We'll also be cutting Tyler Lockett. I know this one's going to hurt a lot of Seahawks fans, but by cutting him pre-June 1st, we're actually opening up $17 million in open cap space. Yes, he's been a very good player for this team for many, many years at this point, but his best years are behind him, and, well, we need the money. We're also going to be cutting Noah Fant. Now, I know the tight end position isn't necessarily a strong suit, so by cutting Noah Fant, you're making it that much more weaker, but by cutting him, we get an additional $9 million in cap space, and I do think that there are some free agents, as well as a pretty deep draft class that we can look to address that position. We're also going to be cutting Rayshawn Jenkins, which opens up $5 million, Roy Robertson Harris, which opens up $6.5 million, and we're going to have 2 post-June 1st cuts. Those 2 players are going to be Draymond Jones, which will open up $16.5 million, and we're going to be cutting Uchenna Nwosu, which opens up post-June 1st, $14.5 million. Now, I know cutting Jones and Nwosu is going to get rid of some of your depth and give you a little bit less options off the edge, but I do view opening up that much cap space as being a bit of a priority, so even though we're going to be losing depth, I think we're getting enough money to cover their spots in free agency as well as in the draft. So after all that, we went from negative $13 million now up to $63.5 million in open cap space. Now, do keep in mind that 2 of those contracts are post-June 1st contracts, so we're not going to be able to hand out a bunch of money in free agency, but we will be able to get a number of key free agents to help add some depth and give us some options on this team. But with that all said, let's move over to the team free agents portion of the video, and, well, this team doesn't have too many free agents, but they do have a couple really important ones that I do want to bring back. In terms of who they have as free agents, they have guys like Pharaoh Brown, Trey Brown, Artie Burns, Stone Forsyth, Travis Gibson, Jonathan Hankins, Ernest Jones, Jaron Reed, Laken Tomlinson, and Kayvon Wallace. Now, a number of those players were important pieces on this defense, so I do want to bring back at least a couple of them. We're going to begin by bringing back Ernest Jones on a 3-year, $42 million deal. He kind of bounced around from team to team last year, but ultimately did land with the Seattle Seahawks and had a very productive year for them last year. Last year, he had 94 solo tackles, 1 sack, and 1 forced fumble with a run defense grade of 73.6 and a coverage grade of 48.5. Now, coverage is not a specialty, and I do think that's kind of why he's bounced around from team to team. But on a team like the Seattle Seahawks with a McDonald defense, I do think Ernest Jones is a really good fit, and I do think moving forward, he should be a big part of this defense, especially in a team that could use some linebackers. So Ernest Jones, to me, made a lot of sense, and I don't think the contract is terribly expensive. We're also going to be bringing back Jarran Reed on a 1-year, $6 million deal. Jarran Reed is a little bit older. His best years are still behind him, but with that said, he's still a very productive player that is very capable of going out there and getting you a couple sacks while still playing decent enough run defense. Obviously, Byron Murphy is going to be somebody who I think will be a big focal point of the defensive line next year. So I do think by bringing in Jarran Reed on a 1-year deal, I think you're allowing Byron Murphy to continue his development and then eventually in year 3 becoming the full-time starter. In year 2, I do expect him to get a lot of playing time, a lot more than he did last year, but I do expect year 3 to be the big breakout year for Byron Murphy, but year 2 will be another developmental year where he could potentially have another solid season. We're also going to be bringing back a couple of just depth options. Kayvon Wallace on a 2-year, $3 million deal, Artie Burns on a 1-year, $1 million deal, and Josh Jobe is a restricted free agent, so whatever contract he gets, we're going to go ahead and match that, or we'll give him our restricted free agent tender. So after all of those free agents we did re-sign, we went from $63.5 million to around $41 million of cap space. So with that said, let's go ahead and now hop over to some team needs. So in terms of team needs, there's really 2 positions that I view as being absolute priorities for this team, and that is the interior of the offensive line as well as the interior of the defensive line. Right now, the entirety of the offensive line for the Seahawks is a bit of a mess. Obviously, you have Charles Cross at left tackle, who you feel really confident in moving forward. As long as he is healthy, you feel great about that. I also think you feel somewhat okay about the center position because you do have a couple options there. Right now, the starter, at least for throughout the season at certain points was, and I'm going to say this wrong, Oluwatimi. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce those names, but he did come in there. He played decently well, at least via PFF, and from what I saw on film, he looked like he was a decent center. So I think you can move forward with him at center because it isn't that big of a priority, but right now, both your guard positions are very weak. And unfortunately, the right tackle position is also a big question mark because just Abraham Lucas can quite literally never stay healthy. So by bringing in a swing tackle, we might also need to consider the possibility of Abraham Lucas not playing too much next year because he just can never seem to stay healthy. But the interior of the offensive line is a massive need. We did not re-sign Laken Tomlinson, and Anthony Bradford, just simply put, is not an option to start next year. So we do need to seriously address both guard positions next year. Interior defensive line, as I mentioned, is also a need because we didn't bring back Jonathan Hankins, and well, even when Jonathan Hankins was playing, the nose tackle position is going to be one that we need to look to address. I feel confident with Leonard Williams, Jarran Reed, and Byron Murphy to go along with Derek Hall and Boy Mafe. I feel like that defensive line is pretty sharp, but we really could use a big, sturdy defensive tackle that could just be somebody who stuffs runs and is just big and fat. Like, I don't really need somebody who's going to get me 5 sacks a season. I just need a true run stuffer, which Jonathan Hankins in theory was supposed to be, but he just didn't really pan out to be much last year. Wide receiver 3 is now also a positional need because we let Tyler Lockett leave. Right now, we're not really confident in guys like Jake Bobo or Jalen Darden or Derek Young. Like, none of those guys to me really speak to be true wide receiver 3 options. Obviously, you feel good about DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba, but going out there and getting somebody who can be your wide receiver 3 should be a priority for this team. Ideally, I think more of a speedster would make a lot of sense for that position because you already have your tactician in Jackson Smith and Jigba. You have your physical jump ball type of guy in DK Metcalf, who can also do other things as well, but I think I need somebody who can maybe spread the field with vertical speed. We also are going to need a tight end because we let go of Noah Fant. Right now, our only starter is AJ Barner, who is extremely young and had a okay rookie season, but we definitely need somebody who's much more proven and has been a consistent commodity in the NFL level. So I don't think AJ Barner is going to be that guy. So we need a bit of a veteran to be our true tight end 1 who's also affordable. Lastly is going to be cornerback 3. I feel okay with Tariq Woolen, Josh Jobe, and Devon Witherspoon, but I think because we let go of a couple corners and I just don't think Artie Burns is cornerback 3 material, I would ideally like to be able to find a true cornerback 3, but I will say that's not necessarily a priority for me. That might be a bigger issue to address in 2026. With our limited cap space, I really wanted to focus in on both of the line of scrimmages, not necessarily too much of a focus on corners, but with that said, if you can find depth there, I definitely do think you should look at doing so. But those are the positional needs. Let's now go ahead and talk about my free agency plan, and as I mentioned in the last section, we're really going to be focusing in on on both lines of scrimmages. We have to fix the offensive line, and the interior of the defensive line is going to be a big time priority for me. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about my biggest contract that I'm going to be handing out, which is going to be a 3-year, $24 million deal to Patrick Mekari. Now, Patrick Mekari has been a staple on the offensive line for the Baltimore Ravens. He can play all 5 positions on the offensive line. I think for our team, we're going to go ahead and stick him back inside at guard. Probably going to play left guard next to Charles Cross to build a bit of a strength on the left side of the offensive line. Patrick Mekari is as consistent, reliable as they come. He's very healthy. He's always out there playing at a very high level. You never have to worry about inconsistencies. He can fit in with your scheme quite very easily. I mean, this is a guy who I just trust wholeheartedly to be a consistent option for this offensive line. And again, you're building a strength with your left side of your offensive line. Having Charles Cross, having Patrick Mekari, having Olu at center. I just feel like now the right side would be pretty weak, but you're building a good strength at that left side position. I also want to bring in Kevin Zeitler on a 1-year, $7 million deal. Now, Kevin Zeitler is going to be somebody that a lot of teams are looking at because he is a veteran who's reliable, kind of like Patrick Mekari, isn't going to cost you a lot, and is not a long-term commitment. That is something that I think the Seahawks team should be very interested in, and because we have the cap space available, I went after Kevin Zeitler. He's going to be playing our right guard position, and hypothetically, with this new addition, our offensive line would look like Charles Cross, Patrick Mekari, Olu at center, Kevin Zeitler at right guard, and then Abraham Lucas, when healthy, at right tackle. I think that offensive line would go from being really bad to one of the better units in the NFC. On a 1-year, $7 million deal, it's not a long-term commitment, so by the time that you have bigger contracts coming up, such as DK's or even Geno Smith's, depending on what you want to do with him, you have even more cap space to work with because Kevin Zeitler probably won't be on the team past 2025. I talked about this earlier, but getting a swing tackle was also a bit of a priority for me. Now, I didn't want to overpay for somebody, but I needed somebody who can come in there, play a few snaps here and there, and just be okay to just average. And I found Chuma Edoga on a 2-year, $3 million deal. Now, he is not a great player. He's definitely not as good as George Fant, but he's a lot cheaper, and he's reliable enough. Again, because we addressed so many other positions on the offensive line, I felt like I had to be a little bit cheaper with the swing tackle, and Chuma Edoga ultimately was one of the better names out there. He's going to be somebody who can step in and just be okay. He's not going to be catastrophically bad, which is the most important thing. But that is it for the offensive line. Let's now go over to the defensive line sort of things, and I want to begin by adding in Tyir Tart on a 1-year, $3 million deal. Just a very reliable nose tackle, very big, has good mass, good size, good run stuffer, but can also give you a little bit of juice in pass rush, but that's not really his forte. His forte is stuffing the run, and 1-year, $3 million deal is extremely affordable, and I think he would fit in quite nicely alongside what you already have with your other defensive linemen that are already really good. I'm also going to be bringing in Derek Barnett on a 1-year, $4 million deal. He is going to be a rotational defensive lineman for this team. He can kind of fill in wherever you need him to, whether it's at the left defensive line, left defensive end, or right defensive end, or even outside linebacker. He kind of gives you a bit of versatility. This is going to be our replacement for losing guys like Uchenna Nwosu and Draymond Jones. This is somebody who's just going to be a cheap, reliable, rotational player who can help some of our other guys rest when they need him to. He's not going to get you 10 sacks a season, but he might be able to get you like 4 to 5 to maybe even 6 sacks a year. This is somebody who will get close to 300, 400 snaps this season if healthy. I also wanted to bring in Rondale Moore on a 1-year, $4 million deal. Rondale Moore will be our wide receiver 3 now. Unfortunately for him, he just has kind of gotten a bad go so far in the NFL. He is somebody who has a lot of potential, but hasn't had the quarterback play and also hasn't been able to stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, playing next to Jackson Smith-Njigba, playing next to DK Metcalf, I do think will open up a lot of options for him to make this receiving core that much more deadly. Again, we talked about it a bit earlier. I wanted somebody who can space the field a little bit more, can be more of a vertical threat, and that is kind of what you're going to get in Rondale Moore. I expect him to have a year where he gets 400, 500, 600 receiving yards at best, but Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to continue to rise along and become even better, and DK Metcalf can be a quality go-to option in terms of being more of a 50-50 ball winner. I think this would give you a lot of variety because Rondale Moore can do more than just spread the ball deep downfield. He can also run some stuff underneath and be a bit of a tactician as well. Hopefully he returns from injury okay, so that is going to be what I'm going to ultimately do, but I will say if I can find a piece in the draft in like the 3rd round, I might consider that as well. The last player I want to bring in is going to be Mike Gesicki on a 2-year, $12 million deal. Mike Gesicki to me is exactly what I was looking for. Reliable, consistent. I know what I'm getting from him. He's a good inline blocker. You pair him next to AJ Barner, I think your tight end duo is going to be good enough for the next couple years while you potentially look for your future star tight end in future drafts, which which I don't feel like this team has really ever had a true star tight end. I mean, I'm sure I am wrong, but it feels like it's been a while at least. With that said, that is my free agency plan. We brought in a good number of players on affordable and fun deals. Again, to recap, Patrick McCarry on a 3-year deal, Kevin Zeitler on a 1-year deal, Chuma Edoga as your swing tackle on a 2-year deal, Tyir Tart on a 1-year deal, Derek Barnett on a 1-year deal, Rondell Moore on a 1-year deal, and Mike Gesicki on a 2-year deal. That kind of addressed a lot of our needs both on the offensive line and defensive line, as well as with some of your more explosive weapons like tight end and wide receiver 3. But with that said, we went from $41 million now down to $7.5 million. For the rest of that money, that can go towards adding depth in certain positions, or maybe giving a few players a bit of an extra bit of money. Maybe it's for bonuses or whatever it may be. With that said, let's now head into our 2 3-round mock drafts. All right, but as you can see, we are on the PFF mock draft simulator. We are at pick number 18, and well, the board actually fell quite nicely for us here in this first round. Tyler Warren is still on the board here, and as tempted as I am to get him, I don't know if he actually will be available, but if he hypothetically is, I am definitely interested in potentially taking him here at pick 18. Just going best player available, I think he is a superstar in the making, so putting him next to Mike Gesicki, I mean, that completely takes out the role of AJ Barner, which might not be the worst thing in the world. I also do like potentially taking Kelvin Banks here because you only have Abraham Lucas on contract for, I believe, like 2 more years, 1 more year. Maybe this could be your future replacement for right tackle if you just do not think that Abraham Lucas can be a long-term answer. And the good thing would be if Abraham Lucas is able to turn it around and stay healthy, you can probably move Kelvin Banks inside to play guard, which might not be his specialty, but I think he could be a good enough guard. I do think he's more of a tackle, but he could play guard. Michael Williams is also on the board, and I think he would give this defensive line a whole bunch of juice. He would probably be playing outside linebacker alongside Derek Hall and Boy Mafe. It's definitely interesting, and it's definitely a piece to consider. Walter Nolan is also on the board. He would give them some juice, but I just don't know if he's much of that nose tackle, which we would need. That would kind of be more of like a Kenneth Grant, who I think would be more of that traditional nose tackle, which actually maybe is a tad bit interesting, but I think at pick 18, it might be a little bit too rich, especially when there's better players on the board. Right now, the pick for me comes down to Tyler Warren, Kelvin Banks, and Michael Williams. If you want to go cornerback as well, there is Jahdae Barron, who I'm a huge fan of and actually would make some sense, but I don't know. I think I might be okay with what I have on the outside with Josh Jobe and Tariq Woolen and Devon Witherspoon. Jahdae Barron would be nice though. He could give you a bit of run at safety as well as potentially playing on the outside, but I view him probably as sticking to nickel to safety more at the NFL level, though he can play outside corner. But ultimately, I think I am going to go with Tyler Warren. You're not going to find a better tight end prospect on the board in the 2nd or 3rd round. Tyler Warren is a true difference maker on offense. He can play all different positions, whether it's tight end, receiver, quarterback, running back, fullback, offensive line. Like, this dude can do a bit of everything. I know we got Mike Gesicki in the with the 2-year deal, but if you could have Mike Gesicki be a rotational part with Tyler Warren, I think that would make a lot of sense. I know Kevin Banks is also on the board, as well as Armand Membu, who are great offensive lineman prospects, but I just think you have to put a little bit of faith in Abraham Lucas. Plus, you brought in Chuma Edoga to be your swing tackle, and I just think bringing in a guy like Tyler Warren would make a lot of sense. So I think I'm going to ultimately do so. But we are back up at pick 50 here, and we did not pick up the offensive line last time, so I think maybe this time we look to do so. And there's a couple of names I really do like. Donovan Jackson has gotten some 1st round buzz as of late. I'm not sure if he'll be here, but if he is, that would make a lot of sense. Ariante Ursare is also here. That would make some sense too. Cameron Williams would also make a bit of sense. So would Wyatt Milam and Jonas Savania. I do think I am ultimately going to go with Donovan Jackson. This is somebody who was a guard for Ohio State through most of the year, but actually had to swing out to play tackle and played pretty well throughout. So this is somebody who can give you versatility, can be your swing tackle, can be your starting guard, can play all 5 positions, could potentially be your Kevin Zeitler replacement in 2026. So I'm going to go with Donovan Jackson. I think that would be a really fun pick. But we're back up at pick 82, and I think this pick I might want to look at interior defensive line, and well, there is somebody in Deon Walker here who I think does make a lot of sense. Deon Walker is an interesting prospect because in 2023, he had a really big breakout year, but 2024 just did not play as well. What you're getting in Deon Walker is 6'6", 345, who's still very, very raw. Now, Deon Walker, for his size, isn't as good as a run stuffer as you would like him to be. So I think this would be somebody who you're going to have to develop throughout 2025, and then hopefully in 2026, he can take a big step forward. I just look at other options on the board here, and I just don't think there's anybody who I'm necessarily in love with. depth, especially as like a pure nose tackle. This guy would give you the size, would give you the mass. It would just be developing like his pad level, his technique. And I think if you can develop that, Deone Walker would be worth a potential 3rd round pick. All right, but this was our first of our 2 3-round mock drafts. Let's now go ahead and hop into the next one. All right, we're on the board at pick 18, and this one looks a lot different than the last one. All 3, both Tyler Warren, Mike Williams, and Kelvin Banks went off the board. 3 picks before us, which is actually extremely funny. So in this situation, this is not ideal, but I do see Armand Membou, who I think is an awesome tackle prospect, who could be potentially your replacement for Abraham Lucas if you don't feel confident about him. He could also be your swing tackle to start off 2025. And then once Abraham Lucas inevitably does get injured, Armand Membou steps right on in there. Walter Nolan would also be a fun player. He can be more of your nose tackle type of guy. Benjamin Morrison is also on the board, but there is some question marks with this hip injury. If he's okay, he might be the pick here, but if he's not, it's just a massive question mark. Emeka Egbuka is also on the board, but he might be a little bit too similar to Jackson Smith and Jigba. So ultimately, I am leaning towards, also I didn't talk about Kenneth Grant, but Kenneth Grant's also here. I think I'm going to take Armand Membou though. This is going to be somebody who will play right tackle for us. He's going to be probably a swing tackle to start the year off, but if he plays good enough, maybe he replaces Abraham Lucas, and then all of a sudden Lucas becomes a bit more expendable. Pick 50 is here, and we're back on the board. Now, Jalen Walker is available, and I am extremely tempted to take him here, but just do not think that Jalen Walker is going to be here. I just think PFF is making a big mistake by dropping him as low as 52. I've seen mock drafts where he goes as high as pick 8 to the Carolina Panthers, so the fact that he's available at pick 50 is just ridiculous. He likely will not be here. Now, if he is, I think the Seattle Seahawks should take Jalen Walker, but he is not going to be available here. So the Seahawks fans who are like, take Jalen Walker, I'm not taking Jalen Walker because he will not be available. We took the tackle last time. I'm looking at either adding potentially a tight end. Gunnar Helm might be a little bit early right now, and I don't think there's a big difference between Gunnar Helm, Mason Taylor, so I'd be okay with waiting till the 3rd round to potentially take a tight end if we even want to take one. I'm looking at interior defensive lineman, and oh, okay, here we go. Derek Harmon might be the pick here. Now, Darius Alexander also had a good year, but is an older prospect. I mean, this dude is, I don't think they have his age. He's like 25, going to be 26, something along those lines. Had a great year, but he's already a finished product. By the time he gets to his 2nd contract, he's going to be almost 30. Derek Harmon is a bit more of a 1-year wonder, but does give you so much as a pass rusher, give you a little bit as a run defender as well. Big individual, 6'5", 310. I just think I might go Derek Harmon here. Alfred Collins is also on the board, who I'm a big fan of, but he might not have the upside as a guy like Derek Harmon, though I know what I'm getting in Alfred Collins, and that's just a dependable interior defensive lineman that can stuff the run and be an okay pass rusher, but is never going to be like a top even 15 player in the position. Derek Harmon does give you the potential to be potentially really good. He also has gotten some 1st round buzz, but I could see him making it to the 2nd round. We are back on the board at pick 82, and I do see Azariah Thomas, and I also see Nick Imanwari, which makes me feel a little tingly somewhere, but I'm not going to take him here. Jeffrey Bassa is also on the board, and I feel okay with Tyrese Knight and Ernest Jones as our 2 linebackers, but maybe you want to add some depth there with a guy like Jeffrey Bassa. I think that could make a little bit of sense here. We'll look at the edge rushers as well, and yeah, I like Baron Sorrell, but he's not a 3rd round pick. I think I'm probably going to take Baron Sorrell here, or sorry, Jeffrey Bassa. Mason Taylor's also on the board. I don't necessarily think I have to take a tight end because we already took Mike Gesicki, and maybe I'm a bit more inclined to take Jeffrey Bassa here. Azariah Thomas is also on the board here, and Tariq Woolen has shown a lot of inconsistencies. So if you potentially want to find somebody who could be his replacement if he continues to be inconsistent as hell, Azariah Thomas could be the guy. So it's a 50-50 shot here. I will go Azariah Thomas, but if you do take Jeffrey Bassa, I understand it. I just feel a bit more okay with my linebacking core more so than corner, so I'll go with a cornerback 3 here in Azariah Thomas. All right, but this is our 2nd of our 2 3-round mock drafts. But if you guys did enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.